man's going to change his hat like 5 times during the episode. That's going to be the cold open, is just him switching out his hat. Hey.
Why does it look crooked? What the fuck?
Because your head's built like that, bro.
Hey, fuck you. Don't speak on my head like that.
Sorry, I just looked at hold on. No, I'm looking at my friend Patrick's review of Gladiator 2. It's 2 stars.
Really?
Rome, parentheses Hollywood, must fall, parentheses stop making unnecessary shit sequels. Like.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a cinematic odyssey through the 100 greatest films spanning from the roaring 1920s to the cutting-edge masterpieces of 2024. Carefully curated from the lovely people on Letterboxd. 2 intrepid souls embark on a journey through a treasure trove of timeless classics and groundbreaking contemporary works, where each frame embodies the enduring magic of the silver screen. Grab your popcorn and join us on this epic expedition through a century of cinematic excellence, where every film promises to enchant, inspire, and leave an indelible mark on the soul. And now, for your listening pleasure, here are the LetterBros.
All right, welcome everybody to the newest episode of LetterBros, where we let a wheel decide our fate in what movie we will watch next, based off the top 100 movies on Letterboxd. As always, I am Felix, and I am joined by Parker. How we doing today, buddy?
Good, dude. Did you have Siri fucking...
I don't know. Are you about to pass a
you?
kidney stone? What are you doing?
No, I'm doing good. I'm doing good, man. No kidney stones here, thankfully. Got to watch an enjoyable movie that we had both seen before, which is kind of cool. Both seen before recently, I should say. It's funny because we had mentioned how I had seen both Star Wars and Empire when I was younger, but I actually didn't even have them listed as watches yet on Letterboxd, which I do for movies that I know I've seen, but I don't really remember anything from them. So Parasite is the first movie that we've both already had logged as watched on Letterboxd. So yeah, it was fun to go in and watch it again, knowing kind of what was going to happen. But yeah, we're talking about Parasite today. Do you want me to bring us into the synopsis here, and then we can just hop into it?
Bring it in.
All right, bring it in I shall. So we watched Parasite from 2019. Of course, it is directed by Bong Joon Ho, which follows the Kim family, who is struggling with poverty and living in a cramped semi-basement apartment. They see an opportunity to improve their fortune when their son, Ki-woo, gets a job tutoring the daughter of the wealthy Park family. Slowly, the Kim family conspires to infiltrate the household by taking over jobs one by one, such as personal driver, housekeeper, art teacher, etc., etc. And they're trying to do this all without revealing to the Park family that they themselves are also a family. However, their elaborate scheme takes a very dark and unexpected turn when a shocking secret that is hidden literally within the Park's house comes to light. This leads to chaos and tragedy as the divide between the rich and the poor grows even more precarious. It won several awards, including Best Picture at the 2020 Oscars. It is a Korean language film and was made in South Korea. On top of Best Picture, I believe it also won Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best International Feature Film. Is that correct?
You pulled those facts, bro. I didn't have them. But yes, I mean, I do remember it winning Best Director. I do remember Best Picture when it won. I didn't know about the other ones, but I believe you.
Yeah, I mean, basically all this to say that it was incredibly well received, especially by the Academy and the film buffs, so to speak. That world really loved this movie, and it's currently in the top 10 according to the Letterboxd community. So really universal praise for this film. Do you think, and let's start it off this way, do you think that this film is warranted to have such universal acclaim in terms of it being one of the top 10 movies that you've seen? Or do you think that it's still good, but maybe a little overrated in that sense?
No, I think all the praise for it is warranted. I mean, I said it in the last episode. I would categorize this as like the real, like the first foreign film that I thoroughly enjoyed watching and had an actual connection to. And I feel that that was the case for a lot of people who watched it during the time. So I still think it holds up. And I mean, despite it being in a foreign language, the actors, and I mean, this might be a slight spoiler, everybody does their job to absolute perfection in conveying their emotions, and their delivery, even though it's in a foreign language, works. And I'm able to have these connections with these characters versus, when we watch like Woman in the Dunes or even Fanny and Alexander, that sometimes there's these connections that just because that it is in a foreign language that I can't really make those connections as well. But here it works. Like, I don't know what Bong Joon Ho was doing in this movie, but he was cooking with gas. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing and was able to pull something out of thin air and take the story and make it seem pretty universal, even though it focuses very heavily on a class dichotomy in South Korea. I mean, just to like end it, I think it is very warranted. I feel that it does deserve to be within the likes of like High and Low that we've seen already in the top 10. It is deserved.
Yeah, I don't know that I would consider this one of my personal favorite top 10 movies of all time, but I would agree with you that I think that the general praise is so warranted, because I think what this movie does so well is it appeals to all types of people. Whether you're a big, cinephile and you really love the technical aspect of film, then you have great shots in this film and you have great symbolism that is portrayed through the picture, right? So it's executed at a very high level, technically speaking. And it's also a very, very tight script that keeps you entertained throughout. So it's not like you're watching a movie that's simply impressive, but maybe a bit on the more boring side. I mean, this movie is well paced as well and entertaining for people, like you said, who maybe don't watch a whole lot of foreign films or don't watch a lot of. I hesitate to use the cringy phrase elevated cinema, but they don't watch like movies that are typically hounded with praise by the Academy. They prefer just some, entertainment popcorn
Hmm.
movies. And this is still that. It has something for everybody. And it's both entertaining, important, sends a strong message, and is well created. So it really is, I see a lot of reviews that say that this is a near perfect film, and I do have my qualms with it, which I think would make more sense to talk about when we do the rankings. But in many ways, I mean, this film checks a whole lot of boxes, and I think it's a very accessible film for people to go and watch, especially if they're wanting to break through into foreign language film, as you had mentioned. What were some cons that you have with the movie? Is there anything that stuck out to you specifically that you don't like, especially upon a rewatch now that you've seen it more than once?
I'm trying to think. There was literally only one. This was also kind of like the same, not issue that I had with Love Exposure, that it brings up something in the script and you're like, okay, like that's really random. Like, why the heck are we doing that? Like the blood tear at the end of Love Exposure, that I was like, okay, that's really weird. That's a weird choice. But then it just comes back up in the script like later on and it's pivotal to the plot. I feel like really the only one was that they keep talking about like a plan that they have conjured, but like I never, and maybe I had missed a subtitle here, but there wasn't really like a plan that the family came together. Like there wasn't really a scene of them like coming up with this plan together. Like he's talking to his friend and then all of a sudden he has a job in the park house and is now recommending his sister. And I'm like, so where was the plan portion? But again, it's a
Are
very
you talking
minuscule.
about the father's plan after they almost get caught
No,
all
I'm
in
talking
joining?
about like the initial plan. Like they keep talking about it already being a plan, but
Because they do mention throughout the latter half of the film about how, oh, dad has a plan, and there is a scene in which he's talking to his son and his son asks him, so what is your plan? And he says, I don't have a plan. Like, there's no point in having plans.
I'm guessing
because
it means that like they keep assuming that he has one or that they're like
right,
talking about him, but then yeah, we get to the scene where the house is flooded and everybody in the village is kind of just sitting in this gymnasium and he's like, life is just better lived without a plan because if you plan and it fails, then you've set yourself up for failure. If you don't plan,
right,
there you can't be disappointed.
right.
Which was one of the more powerful like lines in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that line really gives you a window into the mindset of the Kim family, which is probably not a good mindset for anybody to have. I mean,
Oh
they
no.
really set themselves up for failure in more ways than one throughout this film. And I will say that as an audience, that got a little bit aggravating for me in the sense that I mean, I kind of like the Park family better than I like the Kim family for sure. Uh, eh,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I
And
agree
I
with you. I
understand.
mean, there's a lot more redeeming qualities in the Park family. Like the Park family was, they were victims in this situation. Like they really
Mhm.
did really nothing wrong. Like Mr. Park kind of seems like he's like a little seedy, but they're just living their life. Like the little son's just being a shit, the teenage daughter's being a teenager, the mom is paranoid, and the dad is just a CEO. Like he has that kind of little nutcase mentality that a CEO needs to have in order to be successful. And I mean, they're living their life much like a parasite. The Kim family just kind of injects themselves into the situation and just turns everything to shit,
Yeah, the title is very apt, I think, because
which I
they are
didn't
so.
realize until this viewing. But I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
really?
I mean, that's it. No, I was really
Yeah.
dumb.
I mean, they are. They're parasitic in the sense that they just completely invade the park's home as their host. Essentially, it's their host body. Let's talk about the twist, I guess you would say, that comes up in this movie because I think that the first half of this movie is completely entertaining without it getting into the batshit crazy area of the fact that someone is living in the park home and has been all this time. So I really enjoy the series of the film in which the entire Kim family is getting hired. I think it's very entertaining the personas that they take on, especially the daughter. I think she does an excellent job becoming Jessica and becoming this, very blunt and forward art teacher, so to speak, with the schizophrenic zone in the bottom right corner and the way that she speaks to the mother, who is, of course, very gullible. And we hear that throughout the film. I think that that's very entertaining. And then we find out, after the original maid is fired, that her husband has been living in the park home in a secret bunker this entire time. And she's been sneaking food for him. And again, I want to just emphasize how tight this script is because there's a blink and you miss it line when Mr. Kim is driving Mr. Park, where Mr. Park is saying her only downfall is that she eats so much. She eats for two.
그 뭐래나 그 단점은 딱 하나? 너무 많이 먹는 거? 맨날 뭐 2인분을 드셨대나 뭐.
And, it makes sense
Oh
why she's
my
eating for two.
God.
Yeah, because she's literally feeding her husband that lives in the bunker. And there's a lot of those instances throughout the film where it leads, it does an excellent job of foreshadowing what is to come. I mean, even within the first 15 minutes of the film, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but anyway, in the first 15 minutes of the film, or whenever it is that the Kim son, goes to tutor for the first time, and he's commenting about how beautiful this yard is. And little do any of us know, like the absolute insanity that's about to take place in this very yard. And there's a lot of that throughout. But when we
Mhm.
find out that the husband's been living in the bunker, it turns a little bit more into an action thriller. This movie does, and it still has its comedic tones. I think that you could also argue this is a dark comedy of sorts, but it really picks up the intensity and the stakes because this man has been living in this house for a long enough time to become pretty crazy. Like he's a crazy dude. And his wife, the ex-housekeeper, is similarly crazy. And I really enjoy the scene that takes place where she arrives after the Kim family has stolen all of the park's alcohol and they are down in the bunker. And the way that Miss Kim is speaking to the old housekeeper is so rude. And then the tables turn. The rest of the Kim family falls down the stairs, and the old housekeeper gets a video of it. So now she has the leverage, and immediately went from acting like a pleading victim to saying like, "No, like I have the power now. Like, don't call me sis." Like so the writing
Yeah.
was just so good. And where it goes from there, I mean, obviously with the climax of the film being what it is, it happens all so quickly, and there's really no wasted scene in this film, in my opinion. Not to go on forever, but I do want to add, I do wish that the climax was drawn out a little bit more. I wish we got more craziness happening at the party. What do you think? Did one half of the movie stick out to you more than the other, or do you think it was a natural transition between the two different shows, I guess?
Oh no, I mean the movie was paced out very well and it makes you feel a lot of things. That's the thing that I keep thinking about is that beginning is very clever. The way that they insert themselves into the family, like you can only just like stand back and admire it, but also find it incredibly hilarious of how the mom continues to like be so gullible and just accept everything that's going on, even going far as to say like, I trust recommendations. So, like she trusted the first student that gave
She calls it a chain of trust at one point.
correct to these people who are inserting themselves into their lives and completely destroying it. It's just the mom is one of the funniest characters in this movie, and
Yeah,
you
and
get a
so well
lot of
acted.
her in the beginning of it, and we kind of get that family aspect, and then all of a sudden we get to the Kims all in the house, and we find out about the husband living in the house, and that's when it starts, like you said, to kind of become like an action thriller with like some elements of horror. The one that I pull that I was literally like that genuinely terrified is when they finally talk about what happened to Daesung in the first grade, and we get that scene of him like eating cake in the kitchen, and all of a sudden we see the husband's head pop up, and it's just like his glare is terrifying, like his
Yeah,
like
his eyes
man.
kind of go separate ways.
Yeah, he's got like this manic look in his eyes that's like genuinely terrifying. Like it just this movie blended so many different sort of genres. I just listened to an interview that Demi Moore did about The Substance, and she was talking about how you kind of have to take that risk when kind of meshing all of these different genres, where it could be amazing or it could be a complete failure. And with Bong Joon Ho, it's definitely rides into success. Like he's able to blend all of these genres where, it's really funny in the beginning, very terrifying, and pretty graphic in the middle when we get to like the big scene in the yard, and then kind of have it become this drama and like be very beautiful towards the end. Like I think the ending, it's one of the best endings to a movie I have seen in a long time.
Okay, let's talk about that because I disagree with you.
Really?
And
Okay, so
and what it comes down to is the fact that I don't like the setup with the lights. I don't think that it makes any logical sense.
what the so I had a note on there about the lights, like when you first meet Mr. Kim, or not Mr. Kim, Mr. Park, and he's walking up the stairs, and I was like, dude, that's such a cool feature where you're walking up the stairs and the lights follow you as you come up. But it just
Mhm.
goes to show how tight the script is, and I'm sure Bong Joon Ho was like, some little nerdy kid with a podcast is going to pick up on that and be like, that's really cool. And wait till he sees how it's actually done. I completely forgot about that. Where, the husband is literally like, he has this obsession with Mr. Park and is trying to use Morse code to talk through the lights, but he's also just literally hits the lights as Mr. Park walks up the stairs. Like it's freaky.
Respect.
Correct.
Sorry.
It scared the shit out of me. I'm just glad I
Go on.
got my AirPods in. But it just goes to show, like, one, the tightness of the script. Props to Bong Joon Ho and Han Jin Won for just creating such a tight story, and for Bong Joon Ho to direct that vision and make it make sense and have all of these different elements come together. Like, I mean, we'll get into the ending because I really liked it. I thought it was a nice little cherry on top of this, because the movie could have just easily ended at the park scene, which I feel a lot of people might agree that, like, or I don't know if you do, like, how do you think
No,
it should have
so
ended?
I really do like that he ends up going into the bunker. I think that that is so fitting because it all kind of comes full circle and they're still at the bottom and he has now become the new version of the crazy guy that was down there this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the plan that I'm just going to call him Kevin for brevity's sake. I like the plan that Kevin kind of comes up with, and I like that there is some form of communication between the two of them. However, where I have an issue with it is just the fact that I don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. A, the fact that there would be just 3 light switches down there in the bunker, and the fact that it's clearly like he's been doing it for so long, flickering the light. And the mom even makes a comment saying like we need to get that fixed. I don't know. He's been down there for years. I also like the symbolism of Kevin putting the rock back like into the water and it just becomes another rock. I thought that was really cool. However, how did he get the rock back? The last time we saw the rock, he was smashed over the face with it, and then all of a sudden
Fair.
he has it again. So I that just didn't settle well with me. I appreciated what it was going for. It just didn't quite make logical sense in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't think about how he got the rock back, and I'm trying to like defend that because,
And maybe it
again,
was explained, but I didn't pick up on anything or any reasoning.
I don't know if like they, because like when he first of all, how the hell did Kevin survive that?
I know, right?
Because I'm like, okay, at like first glance, like when you hear him get hit the first time, I'm like, all right. But then he hits him again with the rock and he's like twitching. I'm like, I don't know how. One, how he survived. Two, how he survived and is just normal now.
Not a vegetable. I mean,
Correct.
he's not normal per se. He does have that weird laughing thing.
Yeah, but like that's all you got from getting bonked on the head with a rock twice?
Yeah. I
That
don't
is and
know.
is able to have these legible like conversations in Morse code, but also I guess maybe because I don't know if that's real or not. I think it's all just like a figment of his imagination when he buys the house and is like a
Oh yeah.
university like graduate. Like,
No, that was made clear that that did not really happen. That's what
oh,
he's planning.
but if that's what he's thinking, how is he doing that with
Yeah.
2 bonks to the head with a giant
Well,
rock?
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's never shown that that's actually what happens. That's
Yeah,
just his hope. For
but
all we know, Mr. Kim stays in the basement until he dies, and that's it.
and that's fair. And I just the op and it kind of is just like a very like just sad ending, but I mean upon first viewing I thought it was really beautiful that like he could have that possibility of buying the house and the dad finally comes out like, and this I had only noticed upon like my second viewing was that the mom is also there and she comes running to him. Like that was just really sweet, but to know that it might be a possibility, but it also might not be. It's very sad. What's also really
Yeah.
sad is I totally forgot that Jessica just dies, which I mean, fair. She got stabbed in the chest,
Hmm.
which I mean, we haven't really talked about that scene yet. So, do you want
The
to kind
yard
of,
scene?
yeah.
Yeah,
What did you
sure.
think of that? Because I think it's fucking amazing. I think it's
Well, I
so
think
good.
it's one of the best well-known scenes from the movie. I think that anyone who sees the movie has remembered it for that scene.
Hmm.
Like I said earlier, I wish that it was a little bit more drawn out. I think the whole scene only takes maybe like 5 minutes.
But I think
It's
that's
not.
why it's so effective is that like
I could agree. I could agree.
that it just like you even just like letting you like leave on it or just like you kind of stew in it like did this really just fucking happen? Like we were
Yeah.
already having to deal with some dude now just living in the house and now this person is up here killing everybody and now but I loved how Mr. Kim got involved in that because throughout the movie he's kind of being shown that he's always bothered with how like he is portrayed through smell. Like we kind of
Hmm.
see it at first when Daesung is like, "Oh, the driver smells like the housekeeper." Where like you
Hmm.
could kind of think that obviously is like, they all live in the same house, they all use the same soap, but it also could just be that Mr. Kim has a particular musky smell, which Mr. Park then brings up later while they're all hiding under the table, which is another fantastic scene. It's so
Hmm.
fun. But then you even notice it when later on, he is driving Mrs. Kim around, and I mean, this woman's got her bare feet up, right up against Mr. Kim, but she still has the nerve to kind of put her finger up under her nose to not smell him and even open the window.
I mean, dude, that was right after they returned to a house that had been flooded with sewer water. Like,
That
yeah,
too.
he probably fucking stank. Which
And then,
I
like,
it's another thing. If I could just interject real quick, it bothered
yes,
me that the children never seemed to smell. Like they, right? They would also stink,
fair.
unless I'm
No, but
missing
I
something
mean,
as
like,
well.
so during the
'Cause
flooding scene, Jessica is sitting on top of a toilet that's just spewing shit.
literally,
Uh,
also badass. She's just up on that smoking a cig while the fucking
yeah. Which we don't really
she's a
see her
diva.
smoking throughout the movie. I just thought it was really, I think it was just to, like, kind of put a cherry on top of the joke of that scene where she's just chilling, smoking a cig while this toilet is exploding.
Yeah, it's just like kind of a what the fuck can you even do?
Yeah,
Like your
it's
house is
so
full of
funny.
shit water. The park daughter is literally making out with Kevin, and she doesn't seem bothered by any sort of smell on him. So I don't know. That's just another
Fair.
thing that didn't stick out in my mind. To stay on the topic though of the final scene, I agree with you. I love that the smell is something that was being built up throughout the entire movie, and that as a switch kind of flips in Mr. Kim's mind when he smells the man that literally just killed Mr. Kim's daughter, and he still is offended by that. It's just like all poor people smell like shit is kind of what's going through his mind, and kind of like a fuck you, like I don't have to deal with it, you know. And then
Yeah.
in a fit of rage just goes and kills Mr. Park. Yeah, I think it works. I could be upset with it. There's part of me that's like, that really, like, he really
Like,
did that
did we have
after
to
his
kill Mr. Park?
right, after watching his daughter just get stabbed, but it still worked. And yeah, you're right. It's weird that Kevin survived after two massive blows to the head, and then the husband, like the bunker guy, he dies just by getting stabbed in the abdomen. Mr.
With the
Park dies
kebab.
just by getting stabbed in the shoulder, and Jessica dies by getting stabbed in the heart shoulder area. Which those, I mean, those are plausible. It's plausible. It's just crazy that the three of them died and not fucking
Yeah.
Kevin after getting
And with
head
them, like,
bashed with the rock.
part of me kind of like, and obviously, like, I still think the scene is amazing, but like, what if Mr. Kim didn't snap and Mr. Park sees this kind of revealed in front of him where, like, all the Park or the Kim family is huddling over Jessica to try and heal him, and have this kind of be this grandiose reveal of, like, wait a minute, like, you guys all know each other? Like, that would have been an interesting
Hmm.
take on it. But I mean, that could
I
also
agree.
just be
I
falling into just like,
I agree.
that might be what was it, because that was what I was expecting at first. I forgot Mr. Kim killed him. Like, I was like, oh, this is where he's gonna see that they're all a family, but then all of a sudden, before you can even think that, Mr. Kim already has a knife in Mr. Park's chest, and you're like, wait a minute, stop it, what the fuck is going on?
Hmm.
But I mean, obviously this movie blew up Bong Joon Ho's reputation. He already was, like, pretty notable for Snowpiercer, which was a movie starring Chris Evans that was really good. It spawned a TV show that he was a part of, but he has a movie coming down the pipeline that I'm really excited for. So, I mean, props to this movie for letting everyone know who Bong Joon Ho is, and what he's capable of. So, all props to that. But I feel ready to, or unless you have any final thoughts on the movie,
Yeah,
I'm
one
ready to move
last
to the.
thought, and then let's move. I agree. Let's move into the rankings. But I mean, this has been said over and over again by anyone who's ever talked about this movie, and I think that maybe we should mention it. We might as well. But there's a clear visual representation of wealth and poverty that's displayed through height in this movie. And it's very obvious, but it's still very well done. Down to the detail of the fact that they can get Wi Fi, which is a wealthy commodity, by climbing up onto their toilet and holding it up towards the cafe. So I think it's done very well. When it's pouring down rain, they're descending that big long staircase down back into their life of poverty after being up on the big hill with the
Mhm.
Park family.
Yeah, when they're
So
escaping the house, finally, they have to make the trek all the way back down to, like, below the poverty line. Like
Hmm.
even like the visual of like the Kim's house is under the street, whereas
Hmm.
the Park's house you have to elevate. It's above street level. So where
Hmm.
like it's always showing that, kind of classification of those two extremes, like in the wealth, like in that line. So I thought that was really interesting. So I mean, this
And
movie
then,
is just chock full of those like little visual cues.
yeah, exactly. And secondly, I would say it's also chock full of foreshadowing and little pieces here and there that end up being meaningful later down the line. Another example is when the original maid, cuts the CCTV camera, and then that's what ultimately helps Mr. Kim not get found out because the camera is literally pointing at where
Fair.
he
Wait, when
runs.
did she cut
And
the CCTV?
when she arrived, when the Kim family is drinking all in the living room.
Oh, okay, got. Yeah, oh,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, 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 yeah. I remember
Yep.
now.
So, yeah, on the whole, I mean, I think it's very well deserving of all the praise that it's received, which is a lot. I do think that the Kim family was, for the most part, like pretty unlikable. I didn't really empathize with them whatsoever. Maybe Jessica a little bit, just because she's so cunning and entertaining. Yeah, I thought that they were made to be downright unlikable, and maybe many people will disagree with me there. But I think there were a lot of things that made me think like you guys are kind of doing it to yourselves here a little bit in terms of what it is that you're kind of reaping what you sow in some ways because they make certain decisions that are going to end up badly. For example, too, when Kevin is making out with this girl that his friend who, blessed him with this opportunity,
Who we
he's
never see again, by the
he's just
way.
stealing his girl, which I know too, because he's such a great character. So I would have loved to see him again. Yeah, on the whole, I think it's such a good movie. So well written. I mean, so much fun to watch for a second time and kind of know what is being hinted at before it actually happens. So I recommend anyone to go watch this movie. I would recommend it to everybody,
Yeah.
especially if you haven't seen a foreign language film before and you want something that is still feels very accessible and is still very appropriate for the modern world and something that is going to keep you glued to the screen the entire time. You're not going to have to worry about missing any subtitles because you're damn sure going to be watching it because it's
Yeah.
entertaining. So yeah, man. Do you have anything else to add, or do you want to move into it?
I just have one thing, and it was a review that I saw on Letterboxd for the movie, by director Joe Lynch. He's mainly known for like horror, specifically Wrong Turn 2, but it perfectly encapsulates how I felt watching the movie because I mean, our both of our first viewings was like when it initially came out in 2019 about all the buzz of this movie and how crazy it is, and now just kind of watching it just is something you put on, and obviously like for this podcast, but it was just really fun to listen to this review. It was only saw this film once in theaters when it first came out and loved it then, but it was in the middle of the year that was riddled with amazing cinema, and while I was rooting for it at the Oscars, I never really absorbed how truly great a work of cinema it was. Watching years removed from the Bong hype, it's really that amazing and a bowl of Ramdan. I used to think my favorite film of his was The Host, but this may now be the one, which I haven't seen The Host yet, but I mean, I can agree, like, even just attached from all the hype, because I mean, we get a lot of movies that you watch for like the hype of the Oscars. Like, one I can think of is Moonlight, that I watched because it had all of this notability. It
La La
was,
Land should have won.
I that's another thing. I mean, I was watching it also because Barry Jenkins is a Florida State alumni, so hell yeah. But I mean, there was just all of that buzz around it, and I mean, even watching it again, I don't feel like I liked it as much as the first time I watched it. Where versus La La Land, that I also saw during that time because of the Oscars, and when I watched it a second time, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I don't watch musicals that often, so there's a lot of these movies that, especially Oscar buzz movies, that could win best film, but it's not something that I would like return to. Like Green Book, I watched it for the Oscars and I'm like, okay, but it's not something I would watch again. Like, this is one of those like Oscar worthy and those like praiseworthy movies that I continue to go back to and just have a good time as when I did when I first saw the movie, like Shape of Water. I could watch that
Yeah.
movie every single day. I fucking love it. This, it also falls into that. I feel like knowing everything that happens, you're still caught off guard when it does happen. But that could
Yeah.
also fall into our rankings.
Yes. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but maybe that'd be a fun thing for us to venture into, is like all the Oscar noms or something like that we could check out.
Fair. Maybe
And
that's the
then I want
next
to mention,
list.
because that review had mentioned Ramdan, that apparently, especially in South Korea, this movie really popularized Ramdan, like made
Yeah.
it a very, very, very popular dish, which is just instant noodles and good steak, basically, from what I
Yeah.
saw. But just a little
Well,
fun fact to end the
I
episode
think it's
before
a
we move into
mixture of
ranking.
ramen and udon noodles where like, ramen is
Okay.
a little bit like of a cheaper noodle, but then you have udon, which is a much thicker like noodle. But then the thing that they do to like kind of there's a binging with Babish episode about it where he like cooked ramdan and he talks
Mhm.
about how like it's this mixture of cheap food, which is like the ramen and maybe the udon, and then sirloin, which is a much more
Right.
expensive cut of steak. It's just another one of those little visual cues of like, how are you going to have ramen with a sirloin steak?
Yeah, especially when the mom is like, "What the hell is Ramdan?" I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she doesn't know what this is.
She was like, I don't
So,
know what the hell this is, but they eat that shit up. But let's dive
all right,
into
shall we? Let's do
these
it.
rankings. So, for enjoyability and rewatchability for me, like this is something that I mean, this has been my second time watching the film and I still enjoyed it just as much as the first time I did. This is definitely a movie that I would return to and continue to enjoy and maybe find little more visual cues as I go along, like I did on the second time that I watched it. So I gave it a 14 out of 15.
Wow.
Like I thoroughly enjoy this movie and going into it I'm like maybe it was just Oscar buzz, but it's not. The hype for it is real. It's definitely one of those movies that's going to be talked about for a very long time.
Yes, I think it's definitely made such an impact on the cinemaverse, right? Like Parasite is going to be a renowned film for decades and decades and decades to come. I gave it a 12 in terms of enjoyability and rewatchability. I think I enjoyed it more this time than the first time that I watched it. And I think that a rewatch and possibly even a third watch is going to be incredibly rewarding. I really do. I think it was a good time. I always like saying which direction I would go if I were to give it a different score, and I would bump it higher if I were to give it something other than a 12. But yeah, it's just not quite at the 13, 14, 15 for me. I still really enjoyed it and thought it was a good time. Probably won't revisit it again anytime soon, but it's certainly a movie that I could see myself getting the urge to watch and just kind of throwing it on and enjoying it all over again. For story, I also give it a 12, and I feel as though this might be construed as a bit of a low rating, but at the end of the day, I don't think that the story is so mind-blowing or so completely groundbreaking, I guess you would say,
Yeah,
to bump it over a 12. Where I would bump it higher is with the script. So actually, yeah, let me go with a 13 here,
there
because
we go.
it's not just the story, but it is the way that the story is told, and it's done in a masterful way, especially with all of the foreshadowing, all of the dialogue that is so quick and that turns on a dime. I think it's really, really well done. There are still some elements that frustrate me with the story, such as some of the decisions made by the Kim family, as well as I found much of the scene with them hiding under the table to be, yes, entertaining and impactful, but also somewhat frustrating. And I couldn't really put my finger on exactly why. I think that it just kind of took me out of it there a little bit and trying to really believe what was happening. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that you'd be hard pressed to find a more well written script out there than Parasite. I think it does such a good job of, telling you things without saying them explicitly. And hey, that's one of the hallmarks of a great movie, in my opinion. What do you have for story, Felix?
I also
You gave it
have
a
it at
15.
a
Oh,
13.
okay. I thought you were gonna land a 15 down there for a second.
No, 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 no. Come on. Like chill out. No, and I agree with you. I mean, the script is really tight. It's the story that we get, like it blends all of these different genres in such a beautiful way that I feel really works. And again, like it could be one of those movies that tries to do all of this and fails. But again, Bong Joon Ho just wrote a very beautiful script, and I kind of somewhat disagree with, the Kims. While yes, they have major flaws and they might not have the best intentions, you still kind of want to root for them in some like kind of weird way, because like of how you can respect the hustle, that like how they were able to infiltrate this family. And like, I think one of the things that also really, and this could obviously fall into acting, is that how they're able to still come together at the end of the day and still kind of act like this really weird family and still be somewhat loving to each other. I mean, like in the end when Jessica dies, like it's heartbreaking. Like you see them like going to like her little makeshift grave, and they're like, at least like the mom is devastated. So
Yeah, I would say, and it kind of popped into my head too, why the scene of them drinking and eating right before the Parks come back home from the camping trip that gets rained out. It was frustrating to me because there's just no will for them to continue the good thing that they have going. Like they are being so careless in the sense that they're taking all of their food, taking all their alcohol. Like I'm just sitting there thinking like something is going to be noticed. I mean,
yeah,
something has to be noticed here. And it felt as though they were taking the success that they had achieved and kind of they were throwing it away with their carelessness and
they
their
were
lack of foresight.
gloating.
Yeah, exactly. And it made me think like is it because of decisions like these that you find yourself to be in such a tough spot perpetually? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, and
I
also, how did they do all of that in 8 minutes?
I yeah, I agree. I agree.
How
And we'll
did she
talk about
cook a
that soon.
whole how did she yeah, I mean, that's fair. That'll fall into another category. But going into lasting impression, I gave this a 13. It's, it's still talked about to this day. It propelled Bong Joon Ho's career, I think. I mean, he already had some pretty noteworthy films under his belt, but I feel like this one is his masterpiece, and it's going to continue to be praised as we talk about it. And as it keeps, I could see this holding a top 10 spot for a very long time, like with the likes of High and Low and The Godfather and all the
We
other
haven't
movies
even
that
seen The Godfather yet.
I know, but I've seen The Godfather.
Do you mean on our top 100 list?
Like on the Letterboxd top 100
Oh,
list.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think it's number 9 right now, so it doesn't have that much rope to play with
Fair,
here.
but I could still see it like being up there with all of these other movies. Like it's something that could stand the test of time. Like it's a story
Mhm.
that could be applied. Like yes, it has very much to do with cell phones and Wi-Fi and all this like technology that they have at their disposal, but the story behind it could still be somewhat relatable like 20, 30 years from now, I believe. And it's
Mhm.
definitely left a lasting impression on me because it was the first foreign film I've watched and thoroughly enjoyed. And now I have seen a lot of foreign films. And I credit this movie for really showing me that foreign films definitely have something to offer and can be just as good as anything we see in America.
I give this an 11, and I don't really think I need to go on about the score. It just feels right for me in terms of lasting impression. Obviously, as we discussed, it's going to be forever ingrained in motion picture history as one of the greatest films made. I mean, it's going to be studied in film school. I'm sure it already is to some degree. And for me personally, it is something I will continue to think about. It doesn't have profound emotional or intellectual impact on me personally. I just think it's more of an entertaining film in my mind. And it, of course, does give you things to think about, but it just doesn't quite reach the upper echelon level for me. So 11 for me there. Visual and auditory appeal, I was very close to giving a 10. I'm going to give it a 9 because I think that it just lacks the chutzpah to really put it over the edge there. But there's so many beautiful shots in this movie. I particularly enjoyed the rainstorm when they're coming back home to the flooded house and the shots of them walking through the street. I wish that we got a little bit more like of the streets of Korea, because I think that when we saw the streets of Korea between the two houses, it looked absolutely beautiful. And I think that we were maybe missing a lot of impact on the score. I think that the music served its purpose well, but it wasn't anything incredibly special in my mind. I don't think it really gave the movie the flowers that it could have. If this movie had an excellent score, that would have really put it over the edge, but it didn't. It looked great though. It looked great.
I also gave it a 9 for that reason, that the movie, visually striking, visually amazing, audibly not much left to be desired. That there's, all of these amazing shots, but not a very memorable score to accompany it, which the movie didn't have to be. Like, it didn't need to have this amazing John Williams-esque like score to accompany it. Like, it served its purpose through its visuals and through its performances. And like you said, the shots that we get of Korea and of the sets that we have are beautiful and serve the dichotomy of wealth very well in the movie. And that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I want to add to the Parks house, like the set of the Parks house is so fucking cool.
Oh,
Like
it's so
it
nice.
it works so well for a thriller type of film. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially that big cabinet they have with all the orange lighting and the plates. I mean, it just looks amazing. And then lastly, I want to say one more thing for the visual aspect of this film. I don't think it gets carried away with trying to have all of these incredibly beautiful sweeping shots. It knows when to use cinematography to its advantage, but it
We don't
doesn't
get a
get
lot
carried
of
away.
B-roll is what I'm
Right.
is
It
what I'm
doesn't get
getting.
carried
Is
away.
it's
It
not
all
like
feels very intentional.
we get those, like I just saw Conclave, and this is like the trope with elevated cinema. Like, this is what makes you think that you're watching like this Oscar worthy film, where it's like you get a scene with dialogue, and then in between those dialogues you get these b-rolls and cuts of like different things, like these artistic shots.
Yeah.
But this movie doesn't
None of
really
that.
do that. It does
Which,
it
speaking of, it
within
keeps
the
it very
dialogue.
well paced, which keeps the movie very well paced, right? Would you
Yes,
say?
and I agree with that. I gave it a 9 out of 10 for pacing.
I agree. I also gave it a 9 out of 10. I think that the only time that I really felt it kind of drag a little bit is again the film, or I'm sorry, the scene in which they're all, being gluttonous in the park's
Mhm.
living room and eating all of the food and drink. I found it to be a little bit annoying. And but then it picks right back up because boom, the parks are coming home in 8 minutes. In 8 minutes, and it's just so tight. There really doesn't feel like any wasted dialogue or any wasted shots, like you just said. So I think it's very well paced, almost keyword, almost perfectly paced as a film.
And that's where I could kind of disagree with you in saying that, like, I feel that that kind of break is not only like us kind of taking a break from all of the shit that's been going on, it's also them taking a break because I mean, up until that point, the Kims are nonstop working in trying to get into this family's house. And now that they've
That's
sort
fair.
of finally achieved that yes, they were being very careless with what they were doing, but it kind of serves as like, the audience also taking a break with the Kims and celebrating in what they have just accomplished in pretty much taking over their host's house, essentially. Like, they have fulfilled their
Sure.
parasitic duties in injecting themselves into the lives of the parks and literally basking in their riches and in their pleasures, in their physical attributes. Like, I would say that it serves its purpose well. I could say that where I wouldn't have given it a 10 was that, the beginning of the movie was a little bit slow for me. Like, just
Okay.
the very beginning of it, but then once like we get to, and I get it's supposed to, build this image of how their lives are at this moment, like literally fumigating the house with while them making pizza boxes and Mr. Kim being like, "No, don't close the window. It's free pest control." Like, that's hilarious.
So stupid. For real, bro. Like cardboard's gonna soak all that up. They're about to kill people at this pizza joint.
That's what I thought the pizza girl was complaining about, is that it smelled like
Yeah, right.
pesticide, but they were like, "No, it just the boxes look like shit."
Which I thought it was funny. She said, "Yeah, 1 in 4." And it was definitely Mr. Kim's. Like, he was definitely half-assing it.
It was like every 1 in 4, and then Jessica goes, so at 75% of it is usable though.
In terms of the pacing, I think that it was so, and I guess the acting too. There was so much conversational tension and people saying things that could be taken one way, but is not the way that they mean it. For example, when the daughter of the Park family asks Kevin, like, is Jessica really your cousin's classmate? Like, oh shit, is she in on something? And then it's just used as a segue for us to find out that she's romantically interested in him and thinks that, he and Jessica maybe have something going on. But no, they're brother and sister. So there's so much tension, and the way that the dialogue is written is a lot of fun with us as the audience being clued into certain things that the characters themselves are not clued into. I think that the film was very well acted, and I think that if it wasn't, it would not be as successful as it was. I give it a 9 out of 10. I think
Ooh.
everyone did a very, very good job in this film and played their roles to a T, especially the Kim family and the mother of the Park family. I think that they all just did an excellent, excellent job. The only reason I really could say for not giving it a 10 is that it wasn't immediately a 10 in my mind. And I try to stray away from those perfect scores unless I know for a fact, like, damn, like this movie is a 10 in this category. I didn't quite feel that with this film, but it was still very, very good nonetheless. So I'm sticking with 3 straight 9s there. What do you have for it?
I gave this movie a 10 in acting.
Wow. Okay. Well deserved. Well deserved. That's
Yes,
awesome.
because everybody, and when you think of everybody, because like the friend that we never see again, he served his
Mean.
purpose in integrating this family into the Park family. And that just started this whole chain reaction that, it started that, okay, everybody needs to do their part and play this part well. The Kims played their parts well in showing fake confidence and, faking out the Park family. The Park family played their roles to perfection as the gullible, stupid rich family. Everybody just, they did so well, and I feel that the acting, one, is so important to not only sell the script to just the Koreans that are watching it. They were able to sell it to an international audience and have it make sense to where it could have all of this buzz like any other like horror or thriller movie that like somebody's scrolling through TikTok and you just see like 5 videos of like, this is the scariest fucking movie I've ever seen, or the craziest shit. Like, they were able to go and do that through a movie that doesn't even speak a lick of somewhat English. There are some English words that are spoken, but, and I thought that was really funny that they could just on a dime like just throw out some English words, especially when the parks are talking to each other. But I
Because
feel
I
that
think it's seen as a sign maybe of
of
wealth
wealth,
and intelligence. Yeah,
fair,
in some aspects.
but it just, everybody played their parts to perfection, and I was just engrossed by everything everybody was doing, and I didn't really think that in terms of their acting and their dialogue that I was ever taken out of the movie. And so that's
Yeah,
why,
I mean,
that's where
that's
I'll leave it
true.
at a 10. Everybody did such a good job.
I'm really struggling to find even a lukewarm performance in this movie. So maybe,
Yeah. At first, I thought it was going to be the housekeeper when I first watched it. I was like, okay, this woman's not really serving any purpose, but then she becomes a pivotal part of the movie. She even falls perfectly. Like when when Mrs. Kim kicks her down the stairs and her fucking head just smacks into the wall. And
hard.
like the way that it's, oh my God, like the way
And she
that the
dies
sound,
from that, right? That's why she dies, right?
she gets a massive concussion from it and then dies like later on, but like the way that it's shot where she hits it and like you hear the impact, but the
Mhm.
impact sound is like kind of cut to silence, because that's exactly what she would have been hearing if she got her head caved in like that, where it's like you hear the impact, but because you're knocked out unconscious, it's just silence. And that was
Mhm.
just so jarring to watch. It's sold very well, which bleeds into suspension of disbelief that I gave that a 9 out of 10. that you're never really pulled out of this movie in a lot of aspects until the pesticide part, where I'm like, okay, obviously these boxes are all going to smell like pesticide, but that's never really brought up again. Or that we never really see the friend again, so then what's happening with that? Like, I
Well,
don't
he went to
know.
study abroad.
He did. That he's like, yeah, I'm coming back and I'm gonna take my girl back, whatever. Which I'm also like, how old is this girl? Because she does not look 18. I didn't think so. I thought it was a little weird. It was a
I mean,
little
as a
s-
high school senior, I guess technically it could be 17.
it's a little sus, bro. Come on.
You're a little sus. I gave this movie a 7
Ah,
for
because of the
suspension of
Rock.
disbelief. I could give it a 6. I could give it a 6. Let me tell you what.
Holy
Now,
shit, dude! What
there
is
were a
this? High
couple of
and
things.
low?
There were a couple of things here. So, yes, The Rock. How did that end up back with Kevin? Somebody listening to this, please let me know. Also, there's
Bong
a
Joon Ho,
scene.
if you're listening to this podcast, please let us know where the Rock came back into play.
There's a scene where the housekeeper, she's down there with her husband, the crazy knife wielding maniac. And there's one scene where she gets up and starts untying him with her teeth, right? And then all of a sudden she's back to laying down by the stairwell. All of a sudden, and saying, "Oh, how badly she's concussed." So either she completely imagined it or there was some major continuity issue there. So that was jarring in my mind. It took me out of it for a second. Also, the 8-minute sequence I thought was definitely a stretch. I mean, there is a lot of shit
Yeah,
under
that's
their couch
fair.
and table. And I think that it would have been difficult for that to have really truly been pulled off. I mean, even to the point where if they had said 10 minutes, I would have felt better about it. Lastly, there's certain elements of the jobs where I'm like, how are you so good at cooking, Mrs. Kim? Like, are you really like such a chef that you're cooking for this whole party right now? You didn't know how to make the ramen dish or whatever it was. Like it
Ramdan.
Ramdan. Yeah, there were some aspects of it that just stuck out to me a bit. Specifically, the things that I had just mentioned. I think that there was one more.
Let me check my notes to continually just shit on this movie, bro.
I'm not shitting on the movie. I'm dude. It has a great score so far. Oh yeah, the lights. The
Yeah,
the
the
lights.
lights.
That takes me out of it. I think that honestly, like, I wish that there was some other way that father and son could have spoken to each other at the end of the film. But the fact that there's just like 3 or 4 buttons downstairs that this guy can press that turns certain lights on and off, like, it just did not make sense to me.
That I'm
It didn't make
also
any
like,
sense.
okay, like the Park family moved into this house because it was designed by like some architect beforehand that the housekeeper also knew. So then what was the purpose of those three lights having the buttons downstairs?
Right. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, that's what
The hidden basement makes sense. I understand why that would be a thing. That made
you
total sense to me.
well,
That's
because
fine.
the housekeeper knew the architect that built the house.
Right.
You think that he had built that with that in mind?
With the lights in mind?
No, no, no. Like having like the secret basement to also house this woman's husband.
No, I don't think he built it with that in mind at
So then
all.
what was it for?
She says it in the movie. She says that a lot of wealthy houses have bunkers in case that North Korea attacks or there's some other
Oh
kind of,
shit, you're right. Yeah.
yeah.
That's fair.
So it made sense, but he was embarrassed by the fact that he had built it into the house, so he never told the Park family when they moved in. I just don't get why there's fucking light switches down there for random ass lights in the house that are easily seen from
Well,
outside on the
actually,
hill.
you know
Like it
what? Maybe it was for that reason because when you see the knobs, there's a poster for Morse code next to it.
that is true. That's true.
So
But
maybe it was a way for the architect to like be able to communicate through the bunker if North Korea did attack.
it's plausible, but when I have to really sit there and fight for it, I'm like, okay. It
Yeah,
stuck out to me when I was watching the movie, and it took me out of it a little bit. But
that's
still, a
fair.
7. Not. I'm by no means do I think it's
Yeah.
this movie's being shat on.
70%, dude, it's fine.
I give this movie a 9 for originality because I don't think it's a 10. Obviously, I gave it a 9, but it tells a very original story with a premise that I think that we see often, because a lot of movies are made to express the dichotomy between the wealthy and the less fortunate. There's a lot of movies out there that try and make that point. But this movie does so in a very original and very entertaining way. It's a completely original script, of course, from the two gentlemen that wrote it. It presents its ideas both visually and verbally in a very unique way, in my opinion. If I had to bump one way or the other, I would bump down to an 8, just because I don't think that the premise is anything completely out of this world. But I feel good with a 9. What do you have for originality here?
I gave it a 9 because this movie is basically Barbarian.
It is not. I get that. I also have thought of Barbarian talking about it during this episode, but also Barbarian came out after this movie, you dang it.
I know, I'm just fucking around. But I was just literally thinking about that. I'm like, this is just Barbarian. There's a person in the basement.
Oh my
No,
gosh.
but I mean, it's all props to Bong Joon Ho and Han Jin Won. Props to them for creating such an original story that I feel that it kind of harkens back to, like, you know, a lot of like Hitchcockian thrillers, with like these like sudden twists and turns, but they do it in a very original way that kind of pays homage to those kinds of thrillers from back then. So props to them. They did it and were able to do it in, you know, like obviously in their native language, but to, you know, kind of have that come out of its bubble in South Korea and be able to blow up on the scene and be able to, you know, make an impact in so many different ways. It's wholly original in that aspect. For attachment, I gave this a 3. It's obviously not sitting up there with like the Empire Strikes Backs or like Spirited Aways that I'm going to be holding on to this for like the rest of my life, but in a way it kind of does, because again, this was my first foreign film and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's not going to be something that, you know, I'm including in like my top 10 favorite movies of all time, but I feel
Yeah, I also
comfortable with
gave
it
it a
out of
3.
3.
Sorry to cut you off there. I also gave it a 3 for basically the same reason as you. So we end up with you giving Parasite an 89 out of 100, which means that's a 4.5-star movie for you. I end up with a score of 82 out of 100, which is a 4-star movie in my eyes. And we end up with an average score of 85.5, which is quite high.
It beat High and Low.
All right. So Parasite, our new number 3 movie.
Which is crazy to me, because it's funny that we mentioned like the visuals of height in this movie, because that's exactly what High and Low did too.
That is true. That's true.
So maybe there was some, you know, kind of influence. You know, Kurosawa influences like half of the movies that we see today. So I thought it was very interesting that we hadn't brought that up yet.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a clip of Bong Joon Ho talking about High and Low at all, because I could definitely see it being influential for him.
Oh yeah, it's like almost the same thing, which I guess I can also tie into originality because we kind of saw this in High and Low. But yeah, so Parasite is now sitting as our number 3 movie of all time with an 85.5, just under Spirited Away and our last movie, The Empire Strikes Back, which is crazy.
I think Parasite being in the top 5 is fitting. I would agree with that. And I think it ends up at a good place here. I really do. I think we have a good list so far, man. The only two that I'm wishing... I wish Scenes, Fanny, and Alexander and Love Exposure were all a bit higher. But I think at the end of the day, they'll probably end up fairly high on the list at large, if I had to guess.
Exactly. I mean, we still have a lot of movies to go, bro, which, speaking of...
Let's do it. We keep on plugging along, man. The wheel, I can see it getting smaller a little bit.
I know, we can start to sort of read these titles now, which is crazy. But again, as always, we're leaving Parasite right up there in the park house, just above the hill, and the semi-basement, yes. But it's not in the basement because this is sitting front and center. It's a top 3 movie now, which is great. But now we're going to jump into our next film. Are you ready, buddy?
Number 17, is that right?
Number 17, baby.
Oh my gosh. And Happy New Year to everybody. I believe this is going to be our last film of
you're right.
Of the year. So our first movie of 2025, Felix, what is it going to be?
Oh my
And in
god.
terms of the release of episodes, you know.
Yeah, no, correct. That just raised the stakes now. So, I mean, for all of you watching, I hope this year has been a good one for all of you. It certainly has been for us. Like starting this year, I did not think we were going to be doing this, but
Mhm.
this was such a cool idea that Parker came up with, and that we decided we wanted to do, and it's been very fun. Props
It's
to
been a
you,
blast.
Parker. It's been a
No,
blast,
props
but
to you, man. You've turned an idea into a beautiful creation. I'm excited to continue doing this through 2025, man. Let's see what we're gonna start out with, huh?
oh my god, here we go.
Oh
First
boy.
movie of 2025, baby. Oh my god. I'm always so nervous. Oh god, what is this? Hooray.
All right. So for our
Sancho the
next
bailiff.
movie, we have at the time of the creation of this list was number 64, a movie called Sancho the Bailiff, a 1954 film that I don't think either of us have ever heard of in our entire life.
I'm over here thinking like, oh, we're putting the good juju out. It's 2025. It's gonna be something really cool like Goodfellas or Dune Part 2. And it's not. What is this movie?
All right, so according to Letterboxd, this
Hold on, let me
movie,
pull it up right quick so you can have the
sure.
visual. Okay, it's a Japanese film. That's good.
Yeah, so this movie has shot up the rankings since we created the list. It is now the number 58 film of all time with an average rating of 4.4. A 1954 film directed by Kenji Mizoguchi. And the only synopsis that we have for this film is in medieval Japan, a woman and her children journey to find the family's patriarch who was exiled years before. So, literally nothing to go off of here. It's going to be a Japanese film with a runtime of 124 minutes. Not too long, not too short. I have no idea what we're diving into here, man. I guess I'm excited because I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, me neither. I mean,
Should
this
be
is
interesting.
looking like, I mean, at least from the poster, it looks like it's going to be a samurai film, which
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
always down for. It's on the Criterion channel, which is fun. We'll see what happens, man. Like I know we were just laughing our butts off at the choice of this film, but hey, we've laughed at weirder things and we've ended up loving them, like Love Exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And just like Fanny and Alexander, I could remember us being like, what the hell is this? And then just having a really good time with it. So I'm excited. I'm excited to start the new year with a new film and continue to spin the wheel and see what we keep getting. But as always, it's like I said before, it's been a pleasure to do this with you. And I can't wait to see where the rest of the year takes us. But as always, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Letterboxd at Parker_Paget if you would like to keep up with everything else that I'm watching. Other than that, you can check out Spooky Senders. I know we're not in Halloween season, but if you are looking for that Halloween fix, then check out the Spooky Senders podcast that I do with my friend Colin. We mainly talk about Halloween Horror Nights, but we also talk about other Halloween events such as Not Scary Farm, Six Flags, so on and so forth. And every now and then we just talk about horror in general. So if you're really jonesing for the horror, you can tell I'm a fan. Check out
Same.
Spooky Senders as well.
So speaking of horror nights, this is actually from HHN.
Oh, really? I
This
didn't see that.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
casting crew, team member shirt.
yeah, for Hive back
Oh,
in
that's from Hive?
2017. Yeah, dude, see.
Oh, she. Oh, very
Yeah.
cool.
So that's really funny that you brought that up. So yeah, this was from 2017's Hive crew. So shout out to them. But yeah, go check out Spooky Senders. They know exactly what they're talking about. They love the event. So go check them out. Plug them in the video at some point. But you can also check me out on Letterboxd at ETZIO911. I'm, again, as always, at the movies more than I am in my own house. I haven't watched anything recently, but I'm trying to get out to kind of dissuaded to watch Gladiator 2 after Patrick's review of it, but I want to go watch that. Anora's not playing in theaters anymore, which sucks, but I want to watch that. I got to figure out a way to do that. and review it. But also, please check us out on Instagram at LetterBros Pod for all of our news, our reels, our recaps, whatever. Make sure to go and check all of that out. But as always, until next time, this is the LetterBros Podcast, and we will see you at the movies.